Let's set the record straight from the jump. This isn't some internet myth or Cold War legend that got blown out of proportion. What happened over Lebanon in June 1982 is documented, declassified, and studied in military academies to this day. The event you're focusing on is officially known as Operation Mole Cricket 19, part of the broader 1982 Lebanon War. Bottom line, Israeli pilots flying American-built F-15s and F-16s wiped the floor with Syrian MiG fighters in one of the most one-sided air battles in modern history. We're talking about over 80 Syrian aircraft shot down in roughly 2 hours, with 0 confirmed Israeli losses in air-to-air combat. No spin, no propaganda. Those are the numbers confirmed by multiple independent sources. At the time, Syria was flying MiG-21s and MiG-23s, Soviet-designed aircraft considered respectable on paper. These weren't antiques. They were frontline fighters used across the Warsaw Pact. The pilots weren't rookies either. Many had trained extensively under Soviet doctrine, and some had combat experience. So what went wrong? Everything. By 1982, American aviation technology had quietly pulled far ahead, not just in raw speed or maneuverability, but in systems integration. That's the real kicker. Air combat was no longer just about who could turn tighter or climb faster. It became about who could see first, track first, and shoot first. Israeli F-15s and F-16s were equipped with pulse Doppler radar, look-down shoot-down capability, beyond visual range missiles, helmet-mounted sights, secure data links, and electronic warfare pods. Meanwhile, Syrian MiGs still relied heavily on ground-controlled interception, analog radar systems, short-range missiles, and voice radio coordination. That difference may sound technical, but trust me, it changed everything. Israeli pilots weren't flying blind. They were plugged into a real-time battlefield network. AWACS aircraft in the sky fed them constant updates. Command centers tracked every blip on radar. Pilots knew where the enemy was before the Syrians even knew they were being targeted. Old-school dogfighting rules? Out the window. The Syrians followed Soviet doctrine. Wait for ground controllers to guide them. But Israeli electronic warfare units jammed those communications. Syrian pilots suddenly found themselves cut off, confused, and flying solo in hostile airspace. That's when things got ugly. Missiles were fired from beyond visual range. Many Syrian pilots never even saw what hit them. No dramatic dogfight, no last-second maneuver, just a warning tone then silence. This wasn't bravery versus cowardice. This was technology versus doctrine, and doctrine lost. Before the air battle even started, Israel executed one of the smartest suppression operations ever recorded. The Syrians had installed a dense network of Soviet-made SAM missile batteries in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley. These surface-to-air systems were designed to deny airspace, basically a no-fly zone. Most air forces would have avoided it. Israel went straight through it. First move, drones. Yes, drones in 1982. Not the modern stuff you see today, but remote-controlled decoys designed to mimic fighter signatures. These drones flew straight into Syrian radar coverage. The Syrians took the bait. They activated their radars and launched missiles. That's when Israel struck back. The moment those radar systems lit up, Israeli aircraft fired anti-radiation missiles that homed in on the signal. Radar on, radar dead. Within minutes, 29 Syrian SAM sites were destroyed. That alone was a huge deal. Those systems were supposed to be a shield. They became a liability. Once air defenses were neutralized, Israeli fighters moved in. That's when the massive air battle began. Syrian pilots scrambled in waves. MiG-21s, MiG-23s. They thought they were responding to a standard incursion. They had no idea what they were walking into. Israeli pilots already knew enemy altitude, speed, heading, formation, and radio chatter. That info came through secure data links. Pilots didn't need to talk. They just saw the picture on their displays. Here's where American engineering really showed its teeth. The AIM-7 Sparrow and AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles were lethal upgrades over older Soviet designs. Better tracking, better guidance, better reliability. The F-15 alone had a radar so powerful it could lock targets from extreme range. Syrian MiGs, by comparison, they were flying half-blind. Soviet doctrine assumed pilots would fight under ground control. Once that link was jammed, they were on their own. And that's not how they trained. You could almost hear the confusion in the radio intercepts. Pilots calling for instructions. No answers. Radar warnings screaming. Missiles incoming from nowhere. Some Syrian pilots reportedly didn't even know they were under attack until their wingman exploded. That's brutal, but it's reality. Western analysts later called this battle the official birth of modern air warfare, not because planes got faster, but because combat became network-driven. From this point forward, the rule was simple. Whoever controls the information controls the sky. And in 1982, the U.S. built fighters controlled everything. After the smoke cleared over the Bekaa Valley, military analysts across the world started digging into what really happened. This wasn't just another regional skirmish. It was a wake-up call for every air force still stuck in Cold War thinking, especially for the Soviets. Moscow had supplied Syria with its best export fighters at the time. The MiG-23 in particular was supposed to be a serious contender. On paper, it could match Western jets in speed, climb rate, and even missile range. Soviet engineers were proud of it. NATO took it seriously. But combat doesn't care about spec sheets. The Israelis were flying F-15 Eagles and F-16 Fighting Falcons, both designed in the United States with one core philosophy: situational awareness wins wars. These aircraft weren't just fast, they were smart. The F-15 is an APC-63 radar could track multiple targets simultaneously. It wasn't just seeing enemy planes, it was prioritizing threats, calculating intercept paths, and feeding pilots firing solutions in real time. That was light years ahead of what Syrian MiGs were working with. Meanwhile, F-16s brought something else to the table: insane maneuverability paired with modern avionics. Israeli pilots could pull high-G turns without blacking out, thanks to better cockpit ergonomics and training. They weren't just flying, they were commanding the airspace. And here's the part that really rattled Soviet planners. The Israeli Air Force had fully integrated electronic warfare into their doctrine. This wasn't some side tool. It was the backbone of the operation. They used active jamming, signal deception, false targets, radar spoofing, and communication disruption. Syrian radar operators literally couldn't tell what was real anymore. Some screens showed dozens of targets that didn't exist. Others went blank. Ground controllers lost track of their own aircraft. Imagine being a pilot and hearing, "We don't see you anymore." That's nightmare fuel. Soviet advisors on the ground reportedly watched this unfold in disbelief. They had trained Syrians using Warsaw Pact doctrine. They believed centralized control was superior. This battle proved the opposite. Decentralized, data-linked Western doctrine absolutely crushed it. No fancy speeches, no hero stories, just cold performance. What shocked observers most wasn't just the kill ratio. It was how the kills happened. Israeli pilots weren't getting close. They weren't circling for dramatic dogfights like in old war movies. They were launching missiles from distances Syrian pilots didn't think were possible. This is where Beaver combat beyond visual range changed everything. Many Syrian pilots never visually saw the aircraft that shot them down. That's hard to wrap your head around. You train your whole life to fight an enemy you expect to see. Instead, you get a radar warning, then nothing. That's it. Game over. The AIM-7 Sparrow missile, made in the U.S., was the main workhorse. It used radar guidance and could engage targets far outside dogfight range. Combined with F-15 radar, it became a silent hunter. And when pilots did get close, that's where the AIM-9 Sidewinder came in. Heat-seeking, reliable, deadly. By this point, the Sidewinder had gone through multiple upgrades, and it showed. Lock tone, squeeze, splash. Syrian MiG pilots were still using older missile variants, slower seekers, worse tracking, less resistance to countermeasures. In short, they were bringing knives to a gunfight. Western intelligence later confirmed something wild. No Israeli aircraft was lost in air-to-air combat. Let that sink in. Over 80 Syrian jets gone. 0 air losses on the other side. That's not luck. That's dominance. Even NATO commanders were stunned. This battle became required study material. Pilots in the U.S., Air Force, Navy, and allied nations still analyze it today. Why? Because it proved something brutal. Technology, when paired with smart doctrine, doesn't just give you an edge. It rewrites the rules. And the Soviets knew it. After 1982, they quietly overhauled their entire air combat philosophy. New MiG designs, better radar, more independent pilot training, less reliance on ground control. They didn't say it publicly, but the message was clear. They got outplayed. After the dust settled, military think tanks in the U.S. went into full analysis mode. This wasn't just an Israeli win. This was American tech flexing on the global stage. Every system inside those jets was built around one idea. The pilot should never be blind. Back then, Soviet doctrine still believed ground controllers were king. Pilots waited for commands from radar stations. Fly here, turn there, engage. Now, it worked. On paper, but in real combat, that setup got exposed. Big time. American aircraft were designed for independent decision-making. The pilot wasn't just a trigger puller. He was a battlefield manager. With onboard radar, threat alerts, and electronic countermeasures, U.S. built jets turned pilots into flying command centers. No need to wait for permission. If something popped up, they handled it. That speed, that freedom, that's what won. Israeli pilots later admitted something wild in interviews. They often ignored ground control once the fight started. Not because they were reckless, because they trusted their systems more than radio instructions. That's confidence. That's tech trust. And here's the kicker. Syrian MiGs relied heavily on older radar systems. Shorter range, narrow tracking cones, worse filtering. When Israeli electronic warfare kicked in, those radars went haywire. False contacts, signal dropouts, ghost planes everywhere. Pilots were literally chasing shadows. One Syrian pilot who survived later said his radar screen looked haunted. Not my words, his. That's when it hit everyone watching. This wasn't just better jets. This was a whole new era of air combat. Old school tactics were done. Welcome to the digital battlefield. Now, let's talk about training. Because tech alone doesn't win wars. You need people who know how to use it. And this is where the West really separated itself. Israeli pilots trained like maniacs. Constant drills, mock dogfights, realistic simulations. They studied Soviet tactics like chess players studying openings. They knew exactly how MiG pilots were trained. Predictable attack angles, heavy reliance on ground commands, limited fuel, endurance, standardized maneuvers. So they exploited it. They baited MiGs into bad positions, pulled them into energy traps, forced them into turns. Their jets hated. It was chess in the sky, and the board was tilted. Meanwhile, Syrian pilots didn't get that same freedom. They followed strict doctrine. Deviating wasn't encouraged. Creativity was punished. So when chaos hit, they froze. And let's be real, that's human. No shame in it. But war doesn't wait for comfort. U.S. style training emphasized initiative. If something felt wrong, you trusted your gut and moved. That mindset, that's pure Western doctrine. And it paid off. U.S. military observers later said this battle was proof that technology is useless without mindset. And the mindset was American. From that moment on, air forces worldwide wanted what the U.S. had. Radar like that. Missiles like that. Training like that. Sales skyrocketed. Allies upgraded fleets. The F-15 and F-16 became legends. And the Soviets, they watched quietly. But behind closed doors, they knew. They just got schooled. Now, here's where things get real interesting. After the Bekaa Valley disaster, Soviet military officials quietly started asking some tough questions. Not in public, of course. No press conferences. No speeches. Just closed-door meetings and uncomfortable silence. Because let's be honest, this wasn't supposed to happen. The MiG-23 was marketed as a serious threat to Western jets. On paper, it had speed, climb rate, and solid weapons. But what the brochures didn't show was the tech gap inside the cockpit. American jets were already running on advanced avionics, multi-function displays, better threat warning systems, integrated radar and missile control. Everything flowed together. Soviet jets, still more mechanical, more manual, less automation. That difference matters. Big time. When seconds decide life or death, you don't want to flip switches like you're tuning an old radio. You want info delivered clean and fast. And U.S. aircraft did exactly that. And get this, after 1982, the Soviets started redesigning cockpits. Bigger screens, better radar displays. Sound familiar? Yeah, straight out of the Western playbook. They'd never admit it, but the message was clear. They were playing catch-up. Meanwhile, NATO air forces were studying every second of that battle. The U.S. Air Force literally turned it into a training case study. New pilots watched recordings, radar logs, and declassified analysis. Why? Because it showed what happens when tech, training, doctrine all line up. That's the holy trinity of air power. And America nailed it. Another underrated factor? Logistics. Sounds boring, right? Trust me, it wins wars. U.S. built jets were easier to maintain, faster turnaround, better spare part systems. That meant Israeli crews could refuel, rearm, and get planes back in the air fast. Syrian forces? Not so lucky. Soviet equipment required specialized parts, longer maintenance cycles, more ground crew, more waiting. In war, waiting kills momentum. And momentum is everything. This battle proved Western systems weren't just deadlier, they were smarter to operate. That's why older American veterans watching this today nod their heads. They get it. They lived it. Back then, U.S. engineers weren't just building weapons. They were building systems. Everything talked to everything. Radar to missile, pilot to aircraft, jet to command center. That network approach, total game changer. And this is the part that hits hard for Soviet planners. You can't fix this overnight. You can build a faster jet. You can add a bigger engine. But building a whole ecosystem? That takes decades. America already had it. And in 1982, the world saw it in action. No hype. No Hollywood. Just results. After news of the Bekaa Valley battle spread, Western media didn't hype it at first. No flashy headlines, no chest thumping, just quiet analysis. But inside military circles, oh man, everyone was talking about it. Pentagon analysts called it a turning point. Why? Because this was the first time American-built jets had gone head-to-head against Soviet-built aircraft in large numbers. And the outcome wasn't even close. This wasn't some test range. This wasn't a simulation. This was real combat, real stakes. And the scoreboard? Brutal. U.S. aircraft design philosophy just proved itself under pressure. No excuses. No what-ifs. Even retired American pilots were shaking their heads like, yeah, we told you so. And here's what made it hit harder. The Soviets had always claimed their jets were built for real war, not show. Rugged. Simple, easy to fly. That was the pitch. But real war finally showed the cracks. Turns out, simplicity only goes so far. When the battlefield gets complex, you need smart systems. And American jets had them in spades. The U.S. didn't just build planes. They built flying computers. That difference? Night and day. Soviet engineers later admitted quietly that their aircraft lacked advanced target tracking, multi-target engagement, reliable electronic countermeasures. Stuff American jets already had. That stung. Because now everyone knew. What really rattled Moscow was this. Israel wasn't even using the newest American tech. Let that sink in. These weren't experimental prototypes. These were frontline jets, sure, but not the absolute latest upgrades. Meaning, the U.S. already had even better stuff back home. That thought alone freaked people out. Soviet generals started asking, if this is what they export, what are they keeping? That question haunted them, and it sparked a chain reaction. New MiG programs, faster development cycles, more focus on avionics, attempts to copy Western systems. But copying isn't the same as understanding. U.S. tech wasn't just hardware, it was software, doctrine, training, mindset. That combo? Hard to replicate. Western pilots trained to think independently. Soviet pilots trained to follow orders. Neither is wrong, but only one thrives in chaos. And chaos is war. This battle proved that. From that point on, even neutral countries started switching sides. Buying American jets, training with NATO, upgrading their air forces. Why? Because everyone wants the winner's playbook. And the winner was obvious. After the dust settled, one thing became crystal clear. This wasn't just Israel winning a battle. This was American military design winning a generation. For decades, the Soviets believed numbers could beat tech. More jets, more pilots, more missiles. Quantity over quality. Bekaa Valley proved that idea was dead. You can't outnumber what you can't see. American-built radars changed the game. Look down. Shoot down capability, multi-target tracking, long-range engagements. Syrian pilots were basically flying blind. Their radars, old school, easy to jam, struggled with ground clutter. Meanwhile, Israeli jets were seeing targets miles away, locking them up, sharing data across formations. That's not air combat. That's information warfare. Whoever controls the picture controls the fight. And the Americans own the picture. This battle forced every air force on the planet to rethink everything. Dogfighting still matters, but first contact now happens beyond visual range. You don't need to outturn someone. If you shoot them before they even know you exist. Cold reality. Inside the Pentagon, this battle became mandatory study material. Every war college, every training program, every doctrine manual, they broke it down frame by frame. Why did Soviet doctrine fail? Because it depended on ground controllers, slow radar updates, rigid formations, no pilot autonomy. That works until the enemy moves faster than your system. American doctrine was the opposite. Decentralized decisions, real-time data, pilot freedom, networked awareness. Basically, here's the info. Make the call. That flexibility saved lives. Meanwhile, Syrian pilots waited for orders that came too late. By the time commands arrived, they were already being targeted. That delay? Deadly. And here's the crazy part. Even when Syrian pilots did everything right, they still lost. That shook confidence across the Soviet sphere. If perfect execution still ends in defeat, your system is broken. No sugarcoating it. From that point on, air power strategy worldwide changed. The age of blind dogfights was over. Welcome to the era of sensor wars. After Bekaa Valley, every military analyst had the same reaction. Damn, we're behind. Not Israel behind. Not Syria behind. Everyone else. Because this battle exposed something scary. The gap wasn't years. It was generations. Soviet-designed systems were built for the 60s. American systems were built for the future, and the future showed up early. This wasn't about better pilots. Syrians had solid training. Some were veterans. This was about tools. You can be the best driver in the world, but if you're in a 1,980 seconds car racing a Tesla, good luck. That's exactly what happened in the sky. American jets weren't just faster, they were smarter. They shared radar data. They predicted movements. They controlled distance. Syrian pilots were reacting. Israeli pilots were dictating. Big difference. Reaction loses wars. Control wins them. Simple math. Inside the Soviet Union, this battle hit like a punch to the gut. Their entire doctrine collapsed in one morning. For decades they taught, ground control knows best. Controllers in bunkers guiding pilots step by step. Sounds safe, right? Wrong. In modern air combat, by the time info reaches the ground, it's already outdated. Seconds matter. Israeli pilots had live data. Syrians had delayed instructions. That's like playing chess, but your opponent moves twice before you see the board. Unfair fight. Soviet engineers rushed to respond. That's where MiG-29 and Su-27 came from. New designs, better radars, more maneuverability. But here's the thing, too late. By the time they arrived, America was already cooking the next generation. Stealth, better missiles, better sensors, always one step ahead. Bekaa Valley became the warning sign, a message to the world. Air combat will never be the same, and every nation listened. After Bekaa Valley, countries around the world quietly panicked. No press conferences, no headlines, just closed-door meetings, because everyone realized something ugly. If this happened to Syria, it can happen to us. NATO studied every detail: radar logs, missile telemetry, pilot debriefs. They wanted to know, how did 82 jets disappear with 0 losses? The answer wasn't magic. It was systems. Sensors talking to sensors, jets talking to jets, command talking to pilots in real time. This was network warfare, not dogfights. The old Top Gun style? Dead. Now it's see first, shoot first, leave first. If you don't see the enemy, you're already done. That's the brutal truth. And here's what really shook military planners. This wasn't even America fighting. It was American tech in foreign hands. Israel just proved the concept. So Pentagon analysts asked, what happens when the US uses this at full scale? That question haunted war rooms. Because if a small country could wipe out an air force in 2 hours, what could a superpower do? The Cold War chessboard changed overnight. Soviet allies started doubting Moscow. Quietly. No speeches, but orders slowed. Confidence dropped. Trust cracked. Once trust breaks, alliances weaken. Bekaa Valley didn't just kill jets. It killed belief. Belief in Soviet protection. Belief in old doctrine. That's more dangerous than bombs. When soldiers stop believing, wars are already lost. Let's talk legacy. Because Bekaa Valley wasn't just a battle, it was a wake-up call for everybody. The Soviets, they went back to the drawing board. Hard. MiG-29, Su-27, 4th-gen fighters finally showing up in the late 80s. But here's the cold part. They were already late to the party. The gap was real, and it stayed real. Doctrine had to change. No more numbers win wars. Formations solve everything. Ground control knows best. Nah, that mindset got exposed. Bad. Modern air combat became about information, sensors, data links, electronic warfare. Not guts. Not hero moves. Not ace pilots. Just cold math. Who sees first? Who shoots first? Who survives? Simple, brutal. And here's the part nobody likes to admit. Bekaa Valley predicted the future. Gulf War, Kosovo, Iraq, same pattern. Western jets, total air dominance. Enemy never even sees who hit them. It's not fair. War was never fair. But this was one-sided. American tech changed the game forever. Not just planes, but how wars are fought. Networking, real-time intel, precision weapons. That's modern warfare. Syria learned the hard way, and the world took notes. Because once you realize your enemy can see you before you even take off, man, that messes with your head. Bad. Bekaa Valley didn't just end a battle, it ended an era. Old school air combat, dead and buried. Welcome to the information age.